we do this? Why don't we bring up the other story I wanted to talk about, which was the Supreme Court possibly hearing this Catholic family's appeal because their child had gender confusion in school.
Crazy.
And the state took the kid from the parents because they would not affirm their gender identity.
Where did you send it?
They would have. Did I text that to you? I texted it in the group text with me.
Yeah, group chat. Yeah.
So the parents wouldn't affirm their child's gender identity, and then when they would have supervised visits, they weren't allowed to talk to the kid about God. They weren't allowed to talk to the kid about their gender, anything. They were just stuck dealing with the state. The state took their kid, and the state put the kid with foster parents who affirmed his. I don't know if it's actually a biological male or female.
See what good our error of the freedom of religion has done for us. Does it so much good?
You have to hope the Supreme Court hears this, because this could put a stop to this in a whole bunch of states that are doing this, right? There's a bunch of states that are saying these are sanctuary states for gender, blah, blah, blah. So like, and they're Midwestern states like Indiana.
I know. It's crazy.
You would think this is the Bible Belt, like the heartland of America. Not the Bible Belt, but
Indiana's not in the Bible Belt.
Indiana is part of that. Like it's them in Ohio and Iowa have been like fairly red the last dozen plus elections for the most part. And so that's why it is somewhat strange. But I'm honestly not surprised because, Tim Pool talks about on his show all the time how there's a lot of people who will be these woke elites who will go to red America and then they'll run for office as Republicans saying all the right stuff. But then once they're in office, they'll completely yeah, exactly. So, that's just what it is that there's Marxist style infiltration in so many places. And
I think Haley's a straight up communist.
Oh yeah, no, she's Hillary 2.0.
But I mean, especially in an organization like CPS, no matter what state you're in, 90% of the people in an institution like that, they're going to be woke Marxists no matter what. So
what I found interesting is what you brought up, Anthony. I did not know whenever I read one of the articles on it was what they're not allowed to, the parents are not allowed to even mention God to this person.
Yeah. So these are parents talking to their child. They're not allowed. So, I mean, if the Supreme Court hears this, it could be groundbreaking and change the whole landscape in the country.
Yeah.
Why don't we read the story? Because I had an interesting conversation while I was on vacation with my brother-in-law. And I think I'm going to wind up catching grief for my position on this.
Grief from us or from your family?
From you guys. I really do think people are going to misunderstand what I'm saying, but okay.
I'll do my best to purposefully misunderstand.
An Indiana Catholic couple whose child was removed from their home following disagreements over their son expressing a desire to identify as the opposite sex are asking the Supreme Court to hear their case. Parents Mary and Jeremy Cox follow the Bible's teachings on human sexuality, ascribing to the belief that God designs humans as male and female. Because of their religious beliefs and adherence to biological reality, they could not abide using feminine pronouns to identify their son, who demanded to be called by a female name after he told his parents in 2019 that he identified as a girl. 2021, the Department of Child Services initiated an investigation into the parents following a report that they weren't affirming their son's chosen identity as a girl. The boy was eventually removed from his parents' care and placed in a home that affirmed his self-declared gender identity. According to the law firm Beckett, the parents have filed a petition with the Supreme Court asking the justices to hear the case, stating this court should grant this petition and affirm its precedents on the right. Did I lose my spot?
The right of fit parents to custody of their children.
Yeah, so that's basically the story, right? So I was talking to my brother-in-law about the whole gender conversation, and I'm like, I'm wondering if by us yelling there's only two genders, we've put people, because there was always the tomboy, right? There was always the tomboy and maybe the more effeminate boy.
Mm-hmm.
Always tomboys and always fairies.
Right. So those kids now who are tomboys and fairies, because we're saying there's only two genders, are being like, well, I guess I have to fit into one of these two boxes, and they're being forced into one. Like, it's almost like I know gender and sex are the same thing. So there are two genders, but gender expression kind of has a little bit of, there. I don't know if that's the right word I'm using though. That's why, because he was like jumping on me. He's like, "There's two genders." I'm like, I'm not saying that. Of course, there are two genders. Like there are two sexes.
I think the whole idea of gender expression is that it's just stupid. We shouldn't even use.
But I'm worried that we've put ourselves in a position where, because there's no framework for them to work in, they're like, well, if I'm a little effeminate, I must be a girl. Or if I'm a little masculine, I must be a boy. That's all I'm saying. Like, I'm worried if we chose to frame the conversation wrong.
Sure, yeah. I don't think you're wrong. I think that it's actually a good thing, because I think what you're talking about is like, in masculinity, or femininity, there's a certain range of how someone would necessarily express that. But I think where that can go back to, it can literally go back to like how much testosterone, like for instance, a woman might have, as opposed to the next woman. So it's like, one woman may be like, oh, I want to go and build a tree house, with my brothers and my brother's friends, and et cetera, and play stuff like that. And then the next girl's just like, yeah, I just want to play with dolls and have a tea party.
Now that girl that wants to play with the tree house, I mean, look at Nancy Charles, right? We had Nancy Charles on. Nancy Charles was just like kind of a tomboy.
Exactly.
She had same-sex attraction, right? But she goes to therapy, and the therapist is like,
horrible.
you gotta transition.
Exactly.
And like, it was a miracle that she had a conversion experience, right? Like, it was a legit miracle.
I think the problem is we just as a society don't even understand masculinity or femininity at all anymore.
Yeah.
So there was a warping of what it meant to be masculine. And I hate to use the term toxic masculinity, but you have that sort of that sort of alpha male masculinity that was kind of pushed as the ideal.
Machismo,
Not that that's wrong. I mean, aspects of it are, but that's not solely what it means to be masculine. Saint Joseph would have never fit, your average, like, alpha male stereotype, but he's a model of masculinity.
Yeah,
femininity too.
Well, you can see the conversations that Tim Gordon's having against the red pill scene are like perfect, right? So the red pill guys are basically like there is a form of toxic masculinity.
Did you see Frad?
Matt Fradd even said it was, dude. Did you watch the show that he promoted? Like that?
I haven't yet. I'll have to.
Dude, it is so good. Like, they just break down how ridiculous what the red pill is saying. That it's basically meninism, instead of feminism. I mean, it's the same exact thing as feminism, just the male version of it. They're saying go and be promiscuous, go and like all of their ends that they seek are natural ends. They're all, hedonistic pleasures, and those are the ends they're seeking. Like, they're telling these guys, if you're going to get married, you got to have 50 chicks under your belt. You got to have a $200,000 a year income. It's like, dude, if you sleep with 50 women before you're married, you will never be a faithful husband. You just won't be capable of it. You will have so many bad habits. You will never, like, that is a guarantee your marriage is going to fail.
Plus, they continue that cesspool of thinking fornication is normal and something you should engage in, which is just disgusting. And that's the problem.
What the red pill doesn't discuss is, if you talk to anybody who did live that hedonistic lifestyle, they will tell you how they feel like garbage. I mean, you listen to any celebrity talk about it. They like the rock stars, they'll talk about it. They'll say, I was sleeping with a different woman every night. It just left me feeling empty. If you ever hear a rock star conversion story, those are the best. Like, if you listen to the guy from Korn,
Brian something,
Brian something, he talks about it. He's like, I'm sleeping with all these women, I'm doing all these things, but it just leaves an emptiness in you. You're grossed out by the person you were with, and you just want to get rid of them. And it's just it leaves such an emptiness in you, and that's something they never even touch on. And part of it, like, these guys are all bragging like, yeah, I've been with 50 girls. It's like, dude, you sat at the club until 2 a.m, until the last straggler was there, because you tried to get with all the pretty girls. All of them turned you down, and you ended up leaving with the freaking whale at the end of the night that was just doing the same thing you're doing, and you're bragging about it like it's some great thing. Like these guys are just they're living in this delirium. And Tim, his friend Nick, and somebody else I forgot, just did a great job of just laying out that what an awful version of masculinity that is, and that self-sacrifice and really like laying down your life, and they just did such a good job of it. I know a lot of people think what they think of Tim Gordon. I think he's the only guy actually talking about what needs to be talked about on this topic.
I think you're right, Rob, honestly, because like when you said that we as a culture don't know masculinity or femininity, I think that's rooted in our hyper individualism in the United States, because it's like you look at all these other countries, they say, oh, I became a man when I went through this rite of initiation and my father said that I was a man, or vice versa. Whereas
when
us, it's
your society recognized you as a man.
Exactly. And us, we're just like, well, I don't know, mate, like when I could drive or when I could vote or, whatever, right? We kind of just figure it out ourselves. And the problem is that all of our system is so wonky. When we look to our fathers, we get that image of masculinity, whether for good or for bad. And so I've seen some videos out there that have actually been pretty interesting on the character archetype from J.R. Tolkien, the Lord of the Rings, Aragorn, how Aragorn is like the perfect masculine man, because on the one hand, he'll travel, he'll fight, he'll defend those, he's loyal, etc. But then at the same time, it's like when his brother in arm, Boromir, dies, right? Spoiler alert,
Yeah.
for those of you who still don't.
It's only been out 70 years, but spoiler, guys.
Yeah, just in case. But like, he like in a very like noble way, like, weeps and then like kisses his brother's head as
He sings, he writes poetry.
Exactly. Like, so it's like David, right? David's killing lions, bears, and Philistines, and then he's also writing the Psalms and expressing that emotion in a very good way, like a controlled way, right? But he's still expressing it. Whereas I think a lot of us get our image of masculinity from like 80s movies, where it's just this like macho guy who like sleeps around, swears a ton, drinks a ton, drives a ton of fast cars, and that's it. And then for women, vice versa, it's like, okay, they have to be just like either on the one extreme, right? A man, right? They must be a man, exactly like a man, or
especially in pop culture, right? In pop
Yeah.
culture, it's the superhero chick. It's Lara Croft, Tomb Raider, this big ass chick kicking the crap out of every guy around. It's like I can't even like
horrible.
Dude, I'm not kidding. I cannot watch anything anymore.
They're
Because
garbage.
every single thing. Look, I'm telling you right now, I am very worried about the Cabrini movie, right?
Yeah.
Just from the trailers. I don't know. And I know some of the people that were producers of it and stuff. So I don't know. I didn't see it yet. But I see in the trailers, it seems like they're going for the like there's one clip where John Lithgow says to her, Cabrini, you'd have been a great man. And it's like this super chick who's just going to go against the hierarchy, and she's going to get things done. And I'm hoping that they frame that movie as her love for God.
I have a feeling, and I could be wrong, because once again, it's made by Angel Studios, which does the freaking Chosen, so you never know. But like Ryan Grant, Buck Hall, they haven't seen the theatrical final cut, so who knows? But from what they saw, they said it was good and was faithful.
I hope so. Yeah. I'm not going to prejudge it.
Maybe the trailer is going to draw people in thinking that's what they're going to see, and then to be like, no, it's going to hopefully be the exact opposite.
I see they're like releasing it on Women's Day and International Women's Day, and I just hope. I mean, let's hope for the best. That's all. I haven't seen it yet, so. But yeah, it's that model for women to have to be the girl boss. It's everywhere now. So
yeah.
And the same thing with men, like you're saying, it's either that super macho guy, or now it's
like Peter Griffin from Family Guy. He's the iconic architect on the other end. He's
Homer
this
Simpson.
he's this weak person. The children run rings around him. They're way more smart. And he's just this idiot. He's this bumbling idiot. And so it's like we need Davids and Aragorns out there rather than
what do you think we could do as a good rite of initiation for our boys to become men in our culture? Like I never did one with my son.
That's one thing I've actually wrestled with.
Never mind. Can't say that on YouTube.
Do you have any ideas what you might do with your son, Rob? Like, I mean, I took my son to do things, right? So, I mean, I like when my son, a lot of, when we did a lot of snowboarding trips together, the two of us, and had like deep conversations. And that's where, like, my son really received the Catholic faith in those 3-hour, 4-hour drives where him and I just had these deep conversations talking about the meaning of life and God and all that stuff. But I never did like hey, let's go out to the woods. We're going to do this ritual. And you go from being a boy to a man.
So just from where, taking into account where I live, I'm thinking, I don't know what age, 14, 15, 16, probably somewhere in there. Take just him out on a canoe trip into the Boundary Waters with, where we're doing a lot of portaging, purposefully bring less food than we should have to try to challenge him to catch fish or something like that.
No, you have to tie him to a tree.
Make it safe.
You have to tie him to a tree, blindfold him.
On fire.
Tell him you have to survive the night. I'm leaving. They actually did that in a culture, right? Now the father would be sitting 50 feet away to make sure nothing happened to the kid. But the kid doesn't know that. And he's sitting there with a blindfold tied to a tree. And if he makes it through the night, when he comes out the other end, he's a man. Like that was actually a ritual they would do. And that would be how you proved your manhood. They have in Australia, they have the walkabout.
Does this though get at the heart of like what is a man though? Because that's the thing, is it's like even with these examples, while I think they're good, they do seem to lend toward like something physically you must do. Whereas like, what if, for instance, you're disabled? So like I'm thinking about, like, for me, I'm thinking, okay, what makes a true man a man is going to be someone has righteous character, so virtue, and they're a person of their word. And so if I'm instilling virtue in my child from a young age, so teaching them chastity, obedience, humility, right? And then whenever they get of age in their teenage years and you start to explain why we do these things, if they start living these things out, then I think at some point you can actually sit down and you've looked and examined your son's life and you can say, you are a man who practices chastity. You are a man who practices humility. You are a man, right? That's what a man is, because you're letting your reason, right, by divine grace rule you, as opposed to your passions running you around, if that makes sense. I think that's what a man is someone who allows their reason truly through virtue to guide them around.
I agree with that. I think you still need to do some sort of
physical,
like ritual, some sort of almost liturgy, right? Like, so
yeah, that's what I'm saying. It has to be a ritual.
I think you could do what you're saying, Nick. Mm-hmm. Like you've shown that you are ready for this ritual, for this sort of liturgy to take place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was a point where my son was about 16. He was fighting with my wife, and I grabbed him and I go, "A boy fights with his mom. A man takes care of his mom. That's the difference." And something about that conversation like clicked in his head. And when my wife would ask him to do something, he would just kind of be a little more docile to it, where he would argue with her before that. And it was like these little conversations you have with your kids will affect them. So I remember that was one of them, because he kept fighting with my wife over. I'm like, no, a boy fights with his mom. A man takes care of his mom. That's the difference in boyhood and manhood. But I never did like a ritualistic thing with him. I wish I would have gone out into the woods, just the two of us, and had some kind of initiative, maybe even with his uncles, and did something with like a group of guys and said, all right, tonight.
I kind of had that actually when I was 16. When I turned 16, my father gathered pretty much every older man who had any impact in my life. So it's like music teachers, pastors, mentors, older parents, friends, and they came together for a very like small, intimate surprise birthday celebration. And at the birthday celebration, what they did was they each handed me something that had really impacted them in their life, like whether that be a tool, a memory, or something that kind of helped formulate them as the man that they were. And then they all passed that down to me. Now, they didn't say in that speech, we W a man, but in that it was kind of a physical representation of like, okay, you are a man now. Here are the tools that we are passing on to you. And so sometimes it can honestly be just something as simple as like you maybe just passing down to your son something of value, whether that's knowledge or maybe knowledge plus something physical, and then just saying those words, "You are now a man."
That's actually
one
really
way.
good, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, in so many different stories, you see that passing of a memento from father to son or from
Maybe a
grandfather
knife,
to
right? Like
a knife.
a knife
Yeah,
that meant something to the dad, or it
yep,
could be a
Mhm.
rosary.
Yeah,
yeah,
that'd be great.
exactly.
Great. Mhm.
Yeah, man. Like my dad, growing up, my dad was a phenomenal role model for the man who takes care of his family, right? He taught us all my brothers have such good work ethic. Like every one of us are just, we all work at the same company, but every one of us made it to like supervisor positions, and every one of us will never turn down a day of work. We'll work Saturdays, we'll work overtime. Like we don't care. We just want to make sure our families are taken care of. And I have cousins that work there too, and their fathers didn't do that with them, and they are just awful because their fathers didn't teach them work ethic. But
Yeah.
my dad never, I always had like this bitterness that he never handed me down the Catholic faith properly. He had a phase where he was Catholic, but he always left catechetical stuff to my mom,
Mm.
and he kind of was just in the background, and he would say things like, you got to go to church. You got to but he never had but I don't know if my dad had a deep understanding. I don't think he ever did have a deep understanding of the faith. It was always more of an emotional high he got from being in the charismatic movement. And I don't think he ever had that good foundation to pass on to me. But I mean, I'm talking even like, oh man, I don't know if I want to say this publicly.
Oh boy.
There was an incident where he like said something to me about like, he told me something about like his childhood, just like, and bragged about it.
Mhm.
And I was like, why are you telling me this? Like, I don't know. I shouldn't say it publicly, but I remember being like super disappointed in him. Like, why are you bragging about that? That's not something to brag about, but like, he didn't even understand. And it's weird because I didn't even have my conversion yet, but something intuitive in me knew like, this is the base. Like, you shouldn't be bragging to me about this,
Yeah. Yeah. It's honestly just never ceases to amaze me. We see stats, we know people in real life where it's really the father that formulates the family 110%. And I think that's just something that we all got to realize. It's like every child, it's like this. I'm not a parent, but I've kind of gotten a tiny, tiny, tiny taste over 3.5 weeks to where, these kids are like coming up to me, asking me permission to do things or whatever. Right. And it's weird because, a 12-year-old walks up and asks you
They
permission.
saw you as maybe like an older brother figure where they had to.
Yeah, and it's weird because I've never had that, and so, like, someone comes up to me and asks me permission, but they're 12, I'm thinking, "What do you need my permission for?" Because I'm never used to that, but then I realized, like, "Oh, okay, what do I, in this, like, brief period of time, pass on to them?" And so, like, I would try to instill, like, especially in the boys, like, "You wanna be a man, you wanna do something that's masculine, pray your rosary every day,
Yeah.
especially for your parents right now." Stuff like that, seeing the fact that, like, you see around us religion is so feminized, but then instilling, especially in guys, that like the best thing that they can do is be reliant upon Almighty God, and He's going to be the one that give them the strength to do what they're
So,
meant to
so,
do.
so even though you're not a father yet, and I want to say this to Margot also, because I know Margot doesn't have kids. So you are a father by your vocation, regardless of if you have children or not, right? So I go to work, and I work with a lot of guys in their 20s and stuff. I'm always fathering those young men. Like, there's so many guys at my job who look to me as like a voice of moral clarity. They're like, when they would get engaged, they couldn't wait to tell me that, hey man, I'm finally stepping up and I'm doing the right thing. Because I would always say to these guys, like, what are you doing with this girl? Like, what,
yeah,
what is she, your concubine? Like, what are you doing with this girl? Are you going to marry her? Like, I would
exactly.
always talk to the guys like that. I would talk to them about
Mhm.
like the beauty of having a family and the importance of being a father and what your responsibility is as being a father. And those aren't my kids, but that's the role I play with them. So like, every guy you come in contact with, even if they're older, like, you do have that in some ways. I told in my talk, I talked about this. My son had to call me to go back to mass when I stepped away from the faith for that period of time. And my son was like a father to me. It was weird. He was like, Dad, why aren't we going to church? You know, and it was like this little stroke of conscience that God put in my life.
Yeah. It's crazy.